Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you back for the first episode this time. You met the host last time. That is myself, Jeremy Dalton, and Alex Ruhl. And now we have episode 1, What Happened to the Metaverse? And we're joined by Asha Easton from Immerse UK. Now, while we have a chat about this incredibly grandiose topic, let's first do a few intros. Now, you've heard from Alex and I, but we'll give you a very quick intro, and then we'll go to the most important person in the room, Asha here. So, Alex, if you want to start with your intro, and then I'll go after.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to this session and looking forward to getting into the discussion. I'm Alex Ruhl. I lead the Metaverse Technologies team in PwC UK. And prior to that, I was creating immersive experiences, story-based experiences for the better part of a decade now. So I am so deep down this rabbit hole. Jeremy, what about you?
And Alex and I have actually been working together. So Alex was originally one of our suppliers in PwC UK and worked with us on a number of projects, helping us with script writing, storyboarding, 360 video directing. So it's been a great ride. So great to have her in the PwC network. And so, hi everyone, my name is Jeremy Dalton. I take care of the Metaverse Technologies team in the US, so for PwC US. And I've been very much excited by this industry for over a decade now. I've written a book about the use of VR and AR in business, and have been involved in developing and deploying virtual reality and augmented reality applications to various industries and various companies around the world. Over to you, Asha.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation, guys. My name is Asha Easton, and I run Immerse UK, which is the UK government's innovation network for immersive and metaverse technology professionals. So we're part of a larger organization called Innovate UK KTN, and our role within that organization is really to build the immersive ecosystem, help connect businesses with the academic community, with the investing community, and with the government. And the work that we do around all of that kind of feeds back into the government to determine kind of future, policy and funding strategy and things like that for the system, ecosystem for the UK specifically.
Brilliant. Real pleasure to have you on board, Asha. So I can see comments are already coming in on LinkedIn, and for those of us joining on Twitter as well, welcome. We're interested in understanding where is everyone joining us from. So feel free to leave a comment. We've got a control room here where we can see all of your comments live, and if you just let us know where you're coming from, city, country, around the world, and let us know what your views are on what happened to the metaverse throughout this discussion. One of the key points about our PwC Tech Talks is the interactivity that we have with you, the audience. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to hear your introductions. Tell us where you're from, what you're thinking, and let's have a great discussion.
Already some interesting comments from people that have done TEDx talks on the subject, through to people that seem to be working with the technology day in, day out, having some, kind of interesting discussions about software releases. Matt Nutra, good to see you. Verity in Bristol.
Fantastic. Oh, wow, we've got Vancouver, Canada here. Nice. Tampa, Florida. Matthew's joining us from the airport in Chicago. That is dedication. I love it. Dion, welcome from Jamaica. Oh wow, this is quite incredible.
Steve, welcome Maya, welcome Joe and Sophia. Wow, awesome! Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
We truly are a global audience. This is fantastic. So yeah, very much appreciate everyone. Feel free to continue to bring your comments to the table, and we'll highlight a few that we want to chat about and bring you into the discussion. But for the topic that we're talking about today, what happened to the metaverse? About 2 years ago, the metaverse became a massive thing. Everyone got very excited. It got incredibly hyped. And we sustained that for about 18 to 24 months. And then a technology, which shall not be named, stole all of the oxygen in the room.
We're not bitter.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got nothing against it at all. In fact, no, we're very excited about the convergence of technologies in general. So we're very much looking forward to seeing how all these different technologies work together. But it did steal a lot of the oxygen in the room, and a lot of people now have their focus spread in different areas around emerging technologies. Ultimately, though, one of the problems was around the vision, I think. One of the problems was around the definition of the metaverse. And in fact, why don't we start there? So between us three, let's talk about our definitions of the metaverse, and everyone who's listening in, give us your definitions of what you think the metaverse is. And let's have a chat about one of the biggest problems perhaps around the metaverse, which is how we define it. So maybe over to you first, Alex, for your definition, then we'll go to Asha.
Sure. I mean, I've always had a very user-focused opinion on the metaverse, right? To me, the metaverse is simply the evolution of digital experiences, right? Like the way I always think about it is, you know, I think about like the initial web experience of logging onto a big chunky PC and watching text load on a website. That was the current like the first digital experience that I remember having, right? Most of us remember having that on a flat screen, simple text, maybe a photo if you were lucky, but, you know, never a video, because my goodness, that would have taken far too much bandwidth on, you know, the limited internet back then. Flash forward to today, look at the experience of digital now, right? It's everywhere, it's constant, but it's still attached to these little rectangles, right? So from a user experience point of view, we're now mobile. It's now kind of this more interactive medium. I mean, look at us. We're now like, this wouldn't have been possible back then, right? We're having this truly interactive, truly global conversation live. But what's next? And that for me is the metaverse. What's next? The immersive internet, the 3D internet. It's not necessarily, for me anyway, personally, it's not really about the technology. It's about the experience of how we're interacting with each other and with digital content moving forward. That for me is the metaverse.
You described it as the unflattening of the internet, didn't you, Alex? I thought that was really good.
I definitely stole that from someone else, so I won't take all the credit. But yeah, the unflattening of the internet. Exactly. That's how you summarize it, right? But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Asha, what's your kind of definition?
Well, that's really interesting, because for me, the metaverse to me is more about like the connectivity of virtual spaces and the portability of our digital assets and the ownership of our digital identity, and moving that through 3D and 2D, whatever 2D and 3D spaces that we occupy. You know, I'll go to the kind of the broad definition we landed on for our report last year. We did a immersive economy report. We'd written a few. Our last one came out at the end of 2022. And that kind of looked, again, even at that time, we were struggling with definition. We said, okay, broadly, people were saying it would be an interconnected 3D virtual environments that was the next generation of the internet, that was persistently and synchronously accessible to everyone, or to an unlimited number of users, which we know also is still an issue, and that everyone's experience in that space, the metaverse, would be real-time rendered and interactive. I think that definition of the metaverse as like a place of connected environments has never existed. It doesn't exist. And that is actually something we said in the report. We did a section that was kind of the metaverse and its implications for immersive technologies, and what that was doing to the sector, and how it could play into the growth. But for me, there are arguments about whether or not this kind of thing needs to exist including a blockchain layer that enables, decentralization. Some people think it needs to be decentralized. Some people think it doesn't need to be decentralized. I'm a believer in decentralization, but that's, again, probably something also open to discussion. But I think that one space of the metaverse is not what exists, but I think that all the elements and pieces of technology that would need to work together to make it happen are all being developed kind of a bit in silos, and some parts are starting to interconnect and collide, but we're still a ways off from it. But for me, the connectivity and the portability of assets and identity is the most important part.
Thanks for that, Asha. I know, Nathan, it's really painful to have to go through this, but I think the pain is part of the answer to this question: what happened to the metaverse? We've got all of these different definitions coming in. And I mean, when I've been speaking to people since the advent of this new era of the metaverse, let's call it, because the metaverse is not new, either in concept or in definition, in terms of a term, the best way I found of describing it really simply and succinctly is that it's the convergence of two worlds, the physical world and the digital world. And if you consider that as a definition, it's quite wide-ranging and all-encompassing, and it allows you to bring in the underlying technologies, virtual reality, augmented reality, and blockchain to some extent, and so on. So I think we're getting some really good definitions here from everyone. I really like it. 3D internet.
You can run around it, nice.
Yeah, exactly. Although I think my favorite one is actually Duncan's here. The metaverse is not a thing. It's a philosophy. It's a way of life.
Nice.
And for a lot of us who have been in this space for a long time, I think that is the thing, right? Is that that's how it feels. And I think that's part of the reason why people feel so passionately about what they want to make it, right? And that's part of the brilliance of this sector, and why, you know, when we say what happened to the metaverse, the sneaky little secret is that the metaverse is doing just fine, right? Everyone's still building, everyone's still it's thriving. It's just that we are moving away from
that terminology,
right? And now we're kind of actually, people are saying, right, let's just get stuck in, let's build this, let's pioneer this, rather than maybe talk about it, which I find is part of the interesting thing, right? Is that really matter, because ultimately we have to all move in the right direction. Asha.
And I think the misconception and the thing that maybe hurts with these hype cycles of terminologies is that it's never going to be built in a year. That's not going to happen. As you've been saying, it's been being built for ages, and it will take many more years for, you know, us to get to this kind of dream idea of it. It's we're still far off from that, I think.
But you know what? I want to dig into that. Why is it taking us so many years to get to make this happen? Part of the reason is that this concept that we're trying to bring to the world, this idea, whether you believe it's interconnected worlds and we're all living in a virtual world on our desktop computers, or we're wearing a head-mounted display, a headset, and we're being immersed in completely different environments, this sort of way of digital interaction, particularly with the headset, the wearable on your face, this is different from anything we've attempted before with humanity on such a large scale. We're effectively saying, let's disconnect you completely from the physical world, and let's have something that is strapped to your face, incredibly intrusive area that makes you feel, in some cases, vulnerable, in many cases, self-conscious. And with all of these cultural challenges, yes, there is value there, but this is not as simple as a keyboard and mouse and flat screen interface, which is effectively how we've been interfacing with the digital world for decades now. So that is part of the problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also I think there's a sense of, it's kind of a chicken and egg, right? It has been for a long time. Like, the hardware has to be good enough, like to support these immersive experiences, whether that's in a desktop-based virtual world, whether it's in a fully immersive virtual reality environment, or whether it's something in between, like a mixed reality or augmented reality experience. The not only does the hardware have to allow it, but also then the tools for creators to be creating on it, the unified language, like being able to build something that works cross-platform in order to develop these ecosystems where you don't just have to build just for one very specific device, and then it would cost you loads of money to then port it over to something else. I think that's part of the thing. And what I'm excited by right now actually is seeing a lot more of that being taken into account by, especially, some of the bigger platforms. You look at some of these big gaming platforms, and I see some of them, releasing on kind of the mixed reality or virtual reality app stores, even though their whole user base right now is desktop and mobile and iPads. That to me signals that we are in this era of like these big kind of these big ecosystems of attention kind of expanding out into immersive and seeing what it's all about, because the hardware now allows it, the bandwidth of internet now allows it, the fact that you can have a really amazing experience for much less money than you would have done even like 3 years ago.
And you know what? A lot of society is very impatient. That's another issue. The expectation with all of the money that has been poured into the metaverse concept and the hype around it has led everyone to believing that this will be an overnight success. And not only do we have the cultural challenges that we were just talking about that make it even more difficult than sort of traditional technologies like mobile phone. But even if we take mobile phone, for example, in no way was the mobile phone an overnight success. From early prototypes in the 60s and 70s through to fairly ugly and heavy, uncomfortable, unfashionable devices, you can kind of see a similarity here to where we are now with virtual reality. That was not an overnight success. Even
and
with,
I think there's probably also like an expectation too, I think, of people have of kind of the visual fidelity they might have in 2D and the the speed of experiences, or there's so many different things that you kind of expect to translate seamlessly into the 3, but there's so many issues that still need fixing in user experience and user design, and even just having like the right compute power to enable like the metaverse to exist. We don't have that yet. Like there's so many infrastructure pieces still left to deal with. There's so many user experience issues left to deal with that there won't be that seamless transition. So I think people get like maybe turned off by maybe the experience they have in 3D spaces, or because they have a higher expectation than what's like possible at the moment.
So user experience is really a key point, actually, and should be highlighted in our discussion. When we talk about user experience or UX, we're referring to everything, all of your interaction with this device. So from purchasing it, unboxing it, taking it out, putting it on, turning it on, trying to find the right application or download the right application you want from the store, to running that application using controllers, using your hands, using your voice, using your eyes, whatever it is, all of that encapsulates user experience. And it's a completely different genre of study for virtual reality, augmented reality, virtual worlds, as it is for traditional computing systems on desktop computers, laptops, mobile phones, and so on.
Yeah. And we've tried to make this argument from Immerse, like from the Immerse perspective of how the ecosystem has grown and evolved in at government levels, that we have R&D funding, for example, for innovation on the tech side, from government through programs like Audience of the Future, people might have heard about, but we've also had smaller pockets of money that have gone towards funding development of content and building experiences. And there's far less of that than there is of money that's available to innovate around building the tech. But both need to happen in tandem, because the innovation that happens in storytelling and user experience and that kind of design of experience, that's equally as important, needs to happen in the same time. So
yeah. And I'd be curious, I'm reading through these comments as well, and we would love, I love like the interaction that's happening between you all, and we'd love your thoughts. What do you see? Is there a killer app? Is there a killer tool? I think for a long time we were all expecting, well, eventually, things like, for example, with virtual reality, the headset will get small enough and then magically, it will be like the next big computing platform, where actually, what we're seeing is, the form factors of a headset, right? It's pretty impressive now compared to where it was a few years ago. And now actually it's more about the content. I'm going to highlight this comment from Matt, because I love this. How will we know when the tools are ready? Like, how are we going to reduce that friction? And this is where I want to kind of pivot the conversation into maybe more of a positive light, right? Like, we've discussed what the definition is, the messiness of that. We've discussed potentially what the friction is, why it's not, been an overnight success, even though we know that that's unrealistic to expect of any technology. But now let's talk about how do we know when it is right, when it is ready, and what are we seeing right now? Because here's the thing, right? Anyone that's working on the forefront of this, creating this, working with these tools, we know that this is being used in very large scale organizations in very specific use cases. We know that there are very specific elements of the metaverse technology stack, immersive technologies that are already transforming, especially something like the workplace, but also in other sectors like gaming and entertainment. So what are you guys seeing on that front? Jeremy, from the kind of enterprise side, Asha, from being kind of in the midst of seeing everything that's kind of happening from an immersive perspective in the UK. What are you guys seeing?
I think it's all relative at the end of the day. I was actually speaking, I remember this conversation quite well, despite being, it was a few years ago now. I was speaking to one of the analysts about why they removed virtual reality from their analysis of emerging technologies. And their response very simply was, well, you can buy virtual reality headsets. You can pop down to the electronics store and buy a virtual reality headset right now. So how is that in any way an emerging technology? And I thought that was an interesting view, because most of us would consider virtual reality, even to this day, to be an emerging technology. But that analyst was saying, no, it's not. We're no longer going to analyze it because it's very much a consumer device now, and you can pop down to the local store and get one. So it's in no way emerging by definition. So I thought that was interesting.
Super interesting.
Yeah, but in terms of,
I would still consider it. Well, I don't know if I consider it. Maybe I still consider it emerging, only in the sense that it's not rolled out at scale in the way that we might have expected at this point. Even though we are, you guys have been delivering pilots that have turned into, large scale rollouts for years. Actually, it's not ubiquitous across like all organizations, but there's the other piece of upskilling, and upskilling and education that goes along with this happening in larger organizations, and that's like a whole other issue and barrier to this becoming more adopted. So yeah, and in that sense, I still see it as an emerging technology.
This is an interesting one, building on that, right? From our personal perspective, from a scale of 1 to 10, how immersed in the metaverse do you personally feel on a daily basis? Thanks for that, Monica. So what do you guys think?
1 to 10, how immersed in the metaverse? I would say I'm probably at a 6.5 at the moment.
That's funny. I was thinking like a 5, 6. That's funny you say that.
Despite all of us being evangelists of this technology, yeah. I think we're constantly pushing for more. We want more. But that's not to say, though, that this technology is not immersive. I think we've just been in it for so long now. Wanting to push the boundaries, right?
But I think also part of our jobs is to be speaking to the people that don't use it yet, and that is, and in that you have to meet people where they are, right? And that isn't always meeting them in a 3D world because they're not there yet. It's a lot of, building those relationships first and getting them there. Well, for us, it's government people, who don't necessarily go into headsets at all. They don't have to make policy, so.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point, actually. I think it also connects to one of the reasons as to what happened to the metaverse, because a lot of people were expecting really great things, and hype was building on hype. So you had people that thought this is gonna absolutely change the world, and then you'd have all these investments from different companies, and then you'd have government initiatives come in, and everything kept building on itself to the point where a newcomer coming in just saw hype at such a high level, and obviously the technology is not yet ready to deliver on that level of hype. So you end up entering at this point, and then you have this gap here, which represents disappointment at the end of the day. So despite how good the technology can be, an unsustainable level of hype and expectation can absolutely kill off interest.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, just to kind of jump in, whilst you guys were talking, I was just thinking about, like, how would I define how I feel? And it's interesting. I was instantly transported to a VR experience that I did only a couple of months ago, and it was probably the first time in like a year or so where I've put on a VR headset and I was genuinely mind blown, like genuinely, like 10 out of 10. Never experienced anything like it. And I was just thinking about the fact that no matter how long you're in this industry, no matter how much you're kind of pushing the boundaries, at the end of the day, everyone working in emerging tech is always going to be battling with these kind of, these initial kind of teething issues. I was thinking about the fact that the only thing you have to do if you're ever doubting where this technology goes is put a headset on someone for the first time, right? Like, and I know that we're skewing heavily towards talking about VR specifically, but let's face it, right? Immersive, fully immersive experiences, whether that's mixed reality or virtual reality, is the holy grail of like a truly interconnected virtual world, being able to feel co-present with people, right?
I also have a bit of a soft spot for VR because of the same reason you just said. Like, it is just such a visceral experience, unique experience. You can't get that anywhere else in the world.
And anyone that's never done it before, if you put them in there and they do something, even just something so simple like putting someone in, like, let's just take you to a different country, and you watch the joy on their face. You watch even just like putting them in like, you know, just the menu of looking around, you know, like in some of the kind of like headsets menus, and it's like you're just on a mountaintop. That for me reminds me of the fact that, like, to your point, both of your points, you know, we are early. Yes, you can buy this thing at any kind of like store, but actually, how many people have actually put a headset on and actually been given the opportunity to use this on a day-to-day basis?
Because and to have a good experience, not just put a headset on, because that can be an absolute disaster if they pick the wrong experience.
Yeah.
Someone just wrote a comment, it popped up and went away, and I can't find it now. They said, you know, the whole idea of if you build it, they will come, you know, hasn't applied to the metaverse. There's a lot of empty ghost towns. And I think that goes back to something we were talking about before about there's been an issue in the last couple of years, like people coming in from this space from so many different sectors, so many different backgrounds. And, you know, the key part around storytelling and narrative and building community before entering, you know, as part of building your virtual space or world or whatever is very, very important. And that got lost a lot, I think, in the last year. People just thought you could buy virtual land and people will come to it. But why would they do that? There's so much, and that's like a missing education piece, I think.
Education is absolutely key. In fact, I was talking to people about a model to understand the challenges of implementing this technology and for it to reach mainstream. And education was one, experience was the other, and that's user experience. So we talked about that a little bit. The cost and the content. So once those four are resolved to a great degree, then we'll start to see some real mainstream adoption of the technology in a deeper way. But Alex here, I think, has got a really good question for us to start to conclude our discussion on. Has the hype on the metaverse benefited or hurt the AR VR industry? And we've been through a lot of names. We've been AR VR originally, XR, immersive, metaverse, spatial computing has come in as well. There are lots of different terms, but whatever you call it, has this term metaverse and has the hype on it benefited or hurt as a net result? Let's go over to Asha first.
Yeah, actually, that was one of like the, you know, one of our big conclusions from the Immersive Economy report last year, which was that it actually did have a net positive impact on the XR community because of the increase in private investment that went into the space, increased in interest from funds that weren't interested in the space before, and then them to, you know, making that a new part of the thesis of their fund. You know, the number of massive companies that have got on board now to create standards, for example, the Metaverse Standards Forum, the Open Metaverse Alliance, the newest Alliance for OpenUSD, which is like Apple, Pixar, Adobe, Autodesk, and NVIDIA, you know, all working together to try and create 3D standards that will be applicable for the metaverse. Like there's so much collaboration, I think, that's happened as a result that probably might not have happened if that kind of push hadn't come, and a lot of money that's come to the table that also wouldn't have either. So,
what's your view, Alex, on whether the hype has hurt or benefited the AR/VR industry?
You know, I have a very simple way of measuring this, and it's very personal, it's very anecdotal. The way I measure whether the hype kind of like benefits or not is the more of my friends and family actually understand what I do for a living. Right? Back in 2016, when the first kind of like big hype was happening around VR specifically, and the first kind of like mobile-based VR devices like were all going mad, like Google Cardboard was at like the kind of height of popularity. No one even knew what VR stood for.
Yeah.
I couldn't use VR in a sentence because people wouldn't know what that meant. Flash forward to the kind of, like the big metaverse push, this kind of like, you know, this big explosion in 2021. Not only did every single person know what I was talking about, they were the ones coming to me with questions. Oh, wow. So that's what it is that you do. That's really cool. Could you use it for this? Could I use it for this? How do I get one of those devices? Could I, you know, how can I bring it to my, you know, for my kids' use? How could I use it in my personal life? How could I use it in my business life? How can I use it to redecorate my house? And then even just like recently with this kind of, this new wave of like spatial computing, more and more kind of technology providers getting into the space, Roblox and Fortnite kind of adopting the term metaverse as kind of part of like what represents what they're building, which is these big, vibrant, all of a sudden, I no longer need to explain what it is I do. People get it. And they have so many opinions on it, which is fantastic, because it means that not only do they understand it enough to be able to hold like a full-on conversation and ask questions. So for me, I personally feel like it's actually done an amazing thing in pushing us forward. And it's helping kind of like bring maybe what was these little siloed communities of hardware builders, software builders, user experience designers, kind of artistic creators, pushing them together. And the more we come together, the more we converge, as we always talk about, the stronger the community is, the stronger the pipeline, the stronger kind of like, we can get into industry and actually scale this stuff. What about you?
And that's exciting. And I think like that if we look more holistically at like how all these technologies are, building together, and like we'll get to a point where more people can then be included. And, I mean, in terms of building for it, tools that people are building so that you can design in 3D without needing 3D design skills. You can, sculpt by hand or do things like that. I won't use the dreaded AI term, but I mean, that's going to play a part in enabling more people to access and build things for the metaverse or for virtual spaces. And that'll bring more people to the table ultimately, because there are still barriers to that kind of entry for like a regular consumer.
I've had quite a roller coaster of emotions with the metaverse term. Initially, I was super excited because I thought, yes, this is finally the time for it to become mainstream, and everyone's gonna rally around it, and it's gonna be great. And then as time wore on and the hype got to an unsustainable level and people were just expecting impossible things from this concept, I started to grow a little bit resentful. And I was thinking to myself, oh no, this could be like really bad for the whole industry, and people are going to think it's a flash in the pan thing, and so I was fairly sort of grumpy for a few months, I'd say. But then I realized, similar to Alex, that people may not be, there may be a bit of a downturn. People may not be super happy or don't have their expectations met. But you know what? At least they're talking about it. At least more people have tried it. At least more people are aware of the term and have an understanding. So we don't need to start with, we don't need to explain what virtual reality is every time we enter into a discussion now, whether it's business focused or consumer focused. So that's been a great thing. And despite the downturn, if you look back, and for those of us, I know there are some people in the comments who have been in this industry, for nearly a decade now, some over a decade, some decades. There have been many downturns. There have been many ups and downs in this industry. And these date back to the early 90s, where we had a bit of a lot of hype and then a downturn. Even in the 2010s, we've had various cycles of hype and downturn. So really, this is not anything new, this latest wave of negativity. And so I don't think we should be worried about it. We should look to history to understand that this is normal, that every technology, every concept that you try to bring something new to humanity is going to experience detractors as well as advocates, and it's going to go up and down. And in fact, this is what is going to be the subject of our next discussion in 2 weeks' time. So for those of you who'd like to join us, we'll send out the details shortly, but we will be discussing the history of this technology. And we will not only go back to the 2010s, we will not only go back to the 90s. In fact, we won't even just go back to the 60s and 70s, where we first started to see the use of virtual reality, augmented reality in electronic form, but we're going to go even further back than that. And we'll have some things to show you, some live physical things from the past, but we'll also have a lot of fun in doing that, and we'll bring a guest speaker who has been involved in this industry for far longer than we have. And in fact, if you added up all our years, probably won't even, that person will probably exceed that as well. But we'll keep it secret for now. Thank you all for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you in this. I love this forum. Please come to the next one. And Asha, thanks so much for being our guest on this first episode. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Great to be here. Take care.